Once we got to Chicago, every day was big.
This is an American city, and they gave it to Bay like, play. It's your sandbox.
We're doing stuff in downtown Chicago that's never been allowed before.
This is the biggest thing to film in Chicago ever.
How they are able to do that blows my mind.
It's like, that doesn't happen.
I knew Chicago was gonna get it. I mean, I know they do fireworks here twice a week, but boy, we have a whole different kind of fireworks.
We were looking at different cities just to see like a different look other than Los Angeles, because he loves Los Angeles and filming here, but he wanted something different. So I think when he saw Chicago, and it's a pretty spectacular looking city, so once he saw it, he was like, oh, this is it.
Chicago was the most amazing city in terms of what they gave us, the amount of access, the amount of closures. Michigan Avenue is a street that they said they've only closed twice in the history of Michigan Avenue. They closed the bridge, once for Oprah Winfrey and once for me.
We shut Chicago down for a good month and a half. 6 weeks we were in Chicago, and we didn't leave anything unturned, really. We did Chicago.
We turned the streets of Michigan Avenue into sort of 9/11-esque World War III eruptions all down the streets with rubble and falling buildings and burning cars and crushed light poles and that sort of thing.
We could only get the streets, the big destruction scenes on the weekend, and in a very limited amount of time, and it was usually all night, is when we had to set up these massive scenes of mayhem and debris and destruction.
We had all the larger pieces on wheels, so we could tow them in at night, tow them out the next morning. A lot of it's polystyrene, and we made it as light because we had to maneuver them. So we certainly made everything as light as possible just for maneuverability.
Then my team came in with mobile rubble and smaller rubble. There was another team that came in and placed cars and burning cars.
Some of those scenes have 80 and 90 cars in them, and they all have to be prepared in certain ways. Some of the cars that they wanted burning on set have to be stripped of all interior, all upholstery, all plastic, anything that would give off toxic fume if you burn them. So those are stripped completely, and burn bars are put in so the special effects can bring flames up and take them down as necessary. Anything that's going to be flipped over, we have to pull motors, transmissions, gas tanks, so you can burn them without any danger. Other cars would be wrecked on scene.
3, 2, 1, and
It was a massive, coordinated effort that, given the scope of what we were doing, it went surprisingly well.
But then there was one night when it rained and rained and rained and rained, and we had 8 inches of rain. And I thought, we're never going to make 6 o'clock. But then the sun came out, and everyone thought nothing of it, but it was actually a horrendous night. It was horrible. The first weekend, we were dressing LaSalle, and we had 2 blocks to dress, which we started at 8 o'clock. And then we finished that at 6. The crew came in, and then we moved up 2 more blocks to do the next section in daylight. But Michael decided that he wanted a lot more than that, and in fact, I think at the end of the day, we dressed about 8 blocks.
The question is never if Michael decides to change his mind, it's when he's going to change his mind, because it's going to happen.
How about we do this?
We're changing.
How about those bombs go off?
Changing back. Changing back. Not changing.
Michael would change things on the day. He would dream up other sets that we had to do in the afternoon. It's been difficult.
There's beauty in the fact that everything is a bit malleable here. It's the way that Mike works. Like, you ask Mike how deeply he storyboards, it's not that heavy. He gets on set and sort of creates.
Once he arrives at someplace, and because Michael's such a visualist, that when he sees it, then he sculpts how he wants to shoot it.
I'd love to come up over this car. Give me something where Tyrese can step on this, you can jump over this, you know, boom. This is slippery here, so we got to be careful here, all right, guys? And we should move this up a little bit, okay, guys? Okay.
Not many directors have the confidence to not prepare the way Mike does. He's super prepared, but not in a to-a-T way.
Michael's always improvising. He's always adding things. You know, he'd come in on the day and be very inspired by this or that. And wow, all of a sudden, you know, we're turning left when we thought we were going right.
Why is your timing so different on these two cars? I think this event should go together.
Anything you want, but that's what you gave me.
Well, they should go together. Well, I gave it to you wrong, Jim.
I don't care. I just go and plug it.
All right.
But we got to tell everybody.
I know, so let's figure it out.
He prepares enough to be able to have a malleable environment on set. And that's why this crew is incredible, is they need to adapt to whatever Mike's thinking when he's on set.
Art department, right here. Help us out, man. I think what I like to do is push in. Move all this shit, guys. Give me some fires by this truck right here. Give me some stuff, right? Clear all those other cars, put them on the other side so optics could rip around so fast.
We just came up with a little motto, and our motto was ATT, ATT. That's all the toys all the time, because we never knew what we were going to shoot.
I mean, we have techno cranes here every day, regardless of if we're doing hand inserts or not, because Mike might want to do a hand insert through the roof of the building.
You have to have an A, B, and a C plan, and be prepared that there might be a D plan that you don't know about.
3, 2, 1, go!
Hit it again, and go!
3, 2.
Can stop? No.
One more time, hit it. Get ready.
Time,
Hit it.
You're gonna hit it on this one, guys.
Go, 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 go. We cut.
We've cut that.
And this is the way the man works. See, and the reason his movies look the way they do is because he works that way.
You just got to be able to swing with it or you're doomed.
Art department, help us out here. Where's art department? Art department. I need people following me around when we're doing this shit, okay?
One of the things that Michael wanted was to try to do a lot less in the computer when it comes to all the destruction and all of the action that's going to happen.
Michael Bay loves special effects. He likes to do it real. And on film, right there. He loves what we do, and he's constantly calling for us and calling for me.
Okay, Schwab. And Schwab. Swami. Hey, Schwab, can we burn anything around here or no? Schwab, start the fires. Hey, Schwab, I want to see you start rigging that over here right now. Swami, let's talk about the cues.
When we first got there, we had 2 or 3 cases of 3F, black powder, which we wrap our own bombs and make it up. Kept ordering more and more. We had boxes of black powder. We went through so much powder on that movie, we were worried about running out again.
Seen where people turned out to watch shooting of a film. A lot of times people show up, there's really very little payoff, but they had plenty of great stuff to see. It was mobs and mobs of people.
They estimated something like 25 or 30,000 people were around watching, not to mention all the people that were up in probably the buildings around watching that.
I thought it would be a nightmare, but what we did, Gabriella, the publicist, took our actors in a golf cart blocks away to the fans, because it looked like Universal Studios there.
Every day you would show up, it was like being a rock star. It was like a concert.
The fact that the fans are out there while we're blowing up all of this stuff and doing all these big action scenes, it gives us energy.
Oh, we got more cheers from those Chicago tourists. You wouldn't believe it. It was great. It makes you feel good. They appreciate what we're doing. We do a little thing and they'd cheer, and then we do a giant thing and they'd just come roaring.
The challenge is to try and get them to be quiet until we're done.
It was fun to be a part of that and to know that they were as excited as we were making it.
1, 2, 3.
I
think one of the ways that the third movie was different than the second, and particularly the first movie, was the first two we tried really hard to protect the content and not to show the cars and not to let the characters be seen. And when you shoot a day exterior movie in the center of a city, it's impossible. It's literally impossible. So conversely, we just embraced it.
It was almost like Universal Studios there. It was like a tour. I was seeing the explosions and the stuff going on, and with thousands of people were watching. You know, so we tried to involve them.
Thank you, everybody. Go watch the movie. Good job, everybody. Good job, everybody. Lucas, we're gonna talk.
I loved being in Chicago. I thought our crew and cast had a really good time there because, you know, it's a big city, there's lots going on there, and I think everybody sort of reveled in the moment that we had of making that size film in a major metropolitan city. I'm not sure where else we could have done what we did as successfully as we did in Chicago, just because of the level of cooperation we had.
Mayor Daley, I'm sorry. Clean it up, I promise. You got to stay here. You got to be here for the next 15 minutes. It's great stuff.
Thank you.
Here we go. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
All right, good. And
Okay, same everything. Good?
Yeah, I think it was good, huh?
I think that the reason that they did allow us to do a lot of the stuff was because of our reputation, you know, that we do care and that we're not just a bunch of cowboys coming in blowing up our city. The thing that was really cool was we shot a scene on South Street at the Board of Trades for 5 city blocks, and the next day you never know we were there.
It was really a great experience, and we can't thank the Chicago Police Department enough, and the fire department and everyone in Chicago, the people as well, for all the support of the film. It was just such a great experience, and we look forward to going back.
It was the best city experience I've ever had in my life. A lot of really good memories with the fire and the police. Everyone was in a happy mood. They're nice there. They all say hello. They're really polite. It made it a good city experience.
They don't get much more beautiful than this, do they?
So you'll fix it in post, is what you're saying?
Well, no. It's if we can hit that harder, if we kind of bring it up, I just.
With Michael's features, you're sprinting for the entire time you're on it.
I kept cutting and more footage kept coming in, so you have to constantly be reworking it and reworking it.
For the tilted building sequence, he told us that he thought of it while he was doing stomach crunches, which is funny because it gives us stomach aches.
We were digging that sound, so we went with it.
Often what you hear is not what you'd expect it actually is.
Let's roll.
You know you've made it in this business when Michael Bay is sitting with you and you're rushing to get something done because Steven Spielberg is 2 minutes away and he's coming in any second to look at your cut.
I think that's good. Joel had been on the second movie. Roger had been on the first 2 movies. And Billy, this was his first time. We just hit it hard very quickly, going into complicated scenes and trying to build sections so that we can start feeding the beast, which is the effects pipeline.
Whatever scenes come in, we just take them and start working on it. And we show them to Michael, and then he looks at them, gives us notes, and he may send it to another editor, or he may keep the same editor on it for a while. But the reason why Michael likes more editors is to get a fresh eye on the sequences. Like, he'll give the same sequence to 2 editors, and he'll take, oh, that part's pretty good in that sequence, that part's pretty good in that sequence, let's mix them up, let's look at it again.
He had me and Joel cut the same scene at the same time, and it took about 4 or 5 days to cut it because there was so much footage.
Instead of one brain working on it, you've got, 3 brains. He uses our editorial perspective the best way he can. So, did you guys do anything different here with the... It's the same.
In editorial, you immerse yourself to the point sometimes where you can fool yourself that something is working because you know the geography of where everything is and who is who and what robots are what robots, but it's really important to step outside of that and try to get fresh eyes on it.
The best thing a director can give you as an editor is the ability to make a wrong choice, because you don't want to get so tied up in knots about getting it perfect that you don't think outside the box. I mean, I've done other visual effects movies before, but never as big as this, and never with as many empty plates. You cut these scenes together, and Michael shoots just hours of plates for each scene, and sometimes you literally don't know whether it's a camera reset or it's supposed to be a shot.
I worked together with Digital Domain, cutting sequences together. And one example is the scene in Dylan's mansion where Dylan reveals that he works for the Decepticons. There's a scene in there where one of the Decepticons grabs Carly and pulls her into the car, but he's a robot and he turns into a car. All that scene is just, when it's shot, it's just her on a rope being grabbed and pulled up, and and then there's a shot of a blank street, the mansion in the background, and what I do is I build it all just with the plates. I consult with them, they kind of tell me a little bit about where things that go, and it's just a constant back and forth, just kind of putting it together and making it the most exciting that it can be.
Roll 3D, rolling.
When people said Transformers 3 in 3D, everyone thought, oh my God, that's the movie I want to see. And then we all said, how the f are we going to do that?
The amazing thing about 3D is it actually focuses the audience on what action you want them to actually see.
It does change the cutting pattern a lot.
3D is very bad when you do this. It strobes, it's got a lot of problems there. I'd slow down my style. I did a lot of master shots.
You kind of have to hold shots a little bit longer. There's a lot to look at.
Not only the kinetic imagery that Michael shoots, but it's the kinetic energy of the animation within the frame. As editors, we're cutting lengths of shots, but we've got a whole, company or two of visual effects artists who are editing within the frame. And it's all that editing within the frame that makes pulling off the 3D really challenging. Just because we lock down a shot length doesn't mean the work is done. All we're doing is saying, we want this shot from here to here. ILM, go to it. We like the human performances in the shot. And then once they start working on the robot animation, there is a process where that animation is temp, and then it gets finer and finer until it's locked. It's a lot to figure out.
There's a lot of scenes everybody's going to be talking about. The bat suits is a huge sequence. I mean, that's amazing.
The Birdman dailies are just sick. I mean, it's insane what these guys are doing. I'll never forget, in looking at the dailies, some of the scariest stuff for me is these shots when they jumped both out of helicopters and off the top of some of the tallest buildings in Chicago. And they had these cameras looking off the face of the building where these guys wearing these helmet cams would peer over the edge, and that gave you this perspective shift. It just made your stomach churn. And it was really fun to cut that stuff.
I remember the very first test screening, there was a kid, because you got to take that scene out. This was when it was a rough cut. I'm like, why? He says, you can't do that. I said, well, let me just tell you, all but 2 of those shots are real.
Michael does not like to lean on CG any more than he has to. Even though we're talking about a Transformers movie with 60-foot tall robots running around, the magic of these movies is that it's all meant to be photoreal. And so anytime we can avoid creating something in the computer, Mike is gonna wanna do that. Those guys are real, man. And when they're flying around inside Chicago, especially the helmet cam stuff, really gives you the sense of being up there, and seeing it in 3D is pretty mind-blowing. It looks sick. I've skydived before, but this is nothing. I mean, what I've done is stupid.
You know, one thing that we joke about, Roger and Billy and I, is when you work on a movie, usually there's about 4 money sequences, and this movie's got 12. I'm not kidding you, it's huge.
All right, let's go.
In a lot of ways, as effects artists, you couldn't ask for more than Michael Bay.
Well, I respect him, and he is brilliant. It's exhausting.
He's always thinking a few steps ahead, because you'll be doing animation, and we're all thinking animation, and he'll be like, well, we're gonna get light kicks over here, and I can do a sound cue over for that, and then he's kind of thought the shot through further than you have, because you're just like, you know, blinders on, animation.
He has a fantastic eye.
He sees stuff so quickly. I think his pacing is different to most people.
You pull up a shot and he looks at it and he'll be like, that's soft.
And you're like, how does he do that?
He's my pain in the ass, but he's a effing genius.
Review sessions with Michael are very interesting because you never quite know what you're gonna get.
The transmissions would go every day, and it's laborious. It's just shot by shot, pixel by pixel, light, you know.
He's looking at the shot and he's in there maybe biting on his shirt, and you're like, what's he thinking? He's not saying anything. Then, okay, that's as close as you're gonna get to, looks great, guys. So boom, next shot, you bring it up. Next shot comes up, he's looking at it, and one word you don't wanna hear is the G word. Guys, like, oh God, here we go. And if it's one guys, you're okay.
Terrible looking, guys. Guys, I don't like all the blue.
We can deal with that, you know. Then it's guys, like, and your head just keeps going down with every guys. It's just like, you get the 21 guys salute and you're back to blocking.
Guys. Is that what I do?
He's really great about interacting with the artists, and they love it as well.
What are those little things coming by, like fireflies?
Little bugs.
I love them. Give that guy, that woman, $25. This is beautiful. Who is that? Wayne, I'll pay you back. Just give the money, all right?
Simon Twain.
All right.
Simon Twain.
All right, $25.
All right,
Just send me a bill when you're done.
That's good. It goes too long here, but...
Shit.
Shit's a very descriptive word.
So,
They understand all different iterations of it.
that's trying to make it pop.
Bullshit, you know, it's just some more shit. Shit. Just adds a little more shit to it. I don't give a shit.
I have a very good rapport with the ILM guys, you know? So we've known each other for so long.
They're firing on all cylinders right now. This is a finely honed team.
He's great with really pushing the realism of the characters.
We don't like fake CG.
I love how you did the gun. The gun has really come a long way. It looks amazingly real. Do we want to do some skidding stuff? Let's talk about that.
Smoke.
I know, but the wheels, would you try to, you gotta, let's talk animation of the wheels.
They'll definitely tell you if something's not working right to your face. No BS about it.
Well, Bumblebee looks up. Ferrari still looks so up. His sideswipe is a little lame.
Something we've learned from the first two is not to challenge him.
Where are the bricks? Come on, you're telling me that's where they all land?
I don't think we turned any off.
Am I missing something?
He remembers it all, and it's kind of insane.
I know on the plate we can see him sooner than that. His hair, didn't you have like a different look of his hair? Don't we have to make it go all the way up?
Not yet, not in this shot.
Ah, yeah, gotcha, okay, all right. Just testing you. You passed.
Yeah. I give them a lot of creative freedom. Show me. DD did exactly that.
He actually helps us improve our work, and I appreciate that.
I'm really pleased with the work we've done on this movie. It's taken a lot out of me, but at the end of the day, I'm very proud to be associated with those images and the work that everyone here has done. The moon in particular.
In the moon sequence, we got pretty accurate data. Japan sent up a probe and basically laser scanned the moon.
We're doing a lot of shots on the moon, so we're trying to figure out what the look of the actual moon surface is supposed to be, which is kind of what this is. How to take it from kind of more of a gray shaded, low-res model of the moon surface to try and apply like a look that actually works.
We started out with 6 gravity, moon silt, and robots and such.
As these ships pull themselves out of the moon's crust and all the silt that's around them and break things free, we get to have that elegant ballet of motion that we're not used to down on Earth.
Protoforms, Michael liked them when they ran at a certain rate. We had a bunch of different speeds. And Mike also wanted this quad run. So we took our biped, and fortunately he had very long gorilla arms and very long fingers. The speed of the run is tricky. You know how the Moonmen, they all move kind of slow so they don't like launch themselves for like a football field's length. But they looked better when they weren't running so slowly. We like had to work that out so that the speed was good looking, but not so fake.
So the whole Cybertron being pulled through space to the Earth, I think originally we were forming a lattice that kind of formed the planet of Cybertron. So we started working in that direction. Early on, there's this beam that's kind of feeding the pillars with energy, and the pillars themselves here are kind of projecting some energy, and then we're transforming everything into we're actually like materializing the planet out of it. But then the further we got into this, then Michael Bay didn't seem to really like the idea of materializing the planet. And that's kind of when we got the change of direction from, I think, when he had a meeting with Spielberg and we got these awesome drawings.
Steven Spielberg came over to Michael and did a drawing on a piece of paper. It's very scribbly, but Morton kept it.
So I think the idea was, instead of materializing the planet, there was some kind of portal in space that the planet was being pulled through. So he really wanted to show the ring, the interface where the planet is kind of either materializing or being pulled through. So you can clearly feel that it's being transported from a different dimension or a different place. This is an early concept frame of kind of showing a little bit more of a orange kind of glowy portal. This is the first shot where the planet is actually starting to pull through. So the effects team started coming up with all these like solar flare looking things. We still had some energy feeding, a beam feeding the energy of the portal. So there's kind of energy traveling across. It's kind of neat.
We've done little phones and little kitchen appliances, and that stuff was great, but we've been wanting to get our hands on big giant robots ever since this thing started. Getting a chance to work on big giant robots walking around just blasting people with extreme prejudice was very therapeutic.
And it's amazing. It's a whole different mindset, different animation style. You don't really appreciate it till you have to go ahead and do them, right? How much work Island puts into them. The good thing about them is they're just more impressive, right? I mean, as soon as you put them up there and they're towering over everyone and shadowing people, and you're like, they're awesome. I mean, that's why everyone wants to do Transformers.
The bad boy on this one was Driller. And in many ways, Driller was even harder than Devastator.
We had just finished Transformers 2. We built Devastator. Most complicated thing we'd ever done.
We were pretty sure Michael had broken us with that one.
And when we started this movie, we went down to the art department. We were looking through the robots, okay, Optimus is getting a few upgrades, great, Bumblebee's getting a few. And we get to this piece of art, and it's like spanning, 3 boards.
It's this massive, massive, massive complex robot. A big worm.
Octopus, snake, Cuisinart.
3 football fields long.
Turning and rotating. And one of the hardest things for an animator to do is animate tentacles. This thing is just a huge tentacle with tentacles coming off of it. And the tentacles don't just slither and move, but they're also spinning.
He's got just thousands and thousands and thousands of parts.
On the scale of probably 8 Optimus Primes. Optimus Prime had about 17,000 pieces.
He's so complicated that it just takes a massive amount of patience and computer power to get the scenes with him done.
It took us several months to actually get something functioning where animators had control over how to pose it, how to put the whole package together.
We've managed to make kind of different resolutions of him. The high is extremely slow to work with. It crashed my machine earlier today.
We had to have all of their machines upgraded to the latest, greatest state-of-the-art 64 gigs of memory. I think average home computers have between 2 and 4 gigs.
The most computing power they've ever had to do for any shots ever at Lucasfilm.
So already we're barely able to animate and render this character because he's such a difficult asset. And then we get to the sequence where, okay, now he needs to be crushing a building.
Getting Driller to interact with it at every stage is just an enormous feat.
The skyscraper in this movie is as much a character as anything.
We started modeling the building while we were still shooting.
It's a big, involved, complex model that has to perform in a lot of ways. It breaks in the middle. Pieces of it break out. Driller tears through it.
When you look at the events happening in a shot like this, a lot of it was the individual artist going in and saying, okay, these floors are getting squeezed here in the middle, so I'm gonna crush those up, and then that would then, for the next artist, drive their glass simulation.
The physical dynamics involved with something like that are incredibly complex, both from the modeling standpoint, and then we get into rigid simulations with the computers running simulations based on force and gravity to make all that glass pour out and all that concrete pour out.
And the sides bowing out and flexing. And then the last step is
all the debris and the
paper, concrete, glass.
Construction. That was just an enormous undertaking on itself.
Well, this gives you a few examples, too, of the different layers that go into here.
You see bits of rebar and bits of concrete. Here's a couch that falls. And we have libraries of things like couches and rebar and concrete.
Window blinds.
And the people working on these shots can pull from those libraries.
It really is a layer cake of items to put together.
If you were to sit down and read the script and go, how are you gonna do that? You know, and then seeing the way it is in the film, it's just like, man, we did it. No, I can't believe it, but there it is, and it looks pretty cool.
It's a struggle for us to find the characters in these cold bits of metal. With the case of Sentinel Prime, Michael had always latched on to Sean Connery. He had a beard. We modeled him with sort of one eyebrow lifted up like this.
He was sort of meant to seem regal. He's even got like a little tassel thing kind of hanging down and the big shoulder epaulets.
He's kind of this ultimate badass warrior who's also sort of an older general type.
Well, Leonard Nimoy, he married Susan Bay, who's a cousin of mine. I finally got the kahunas up to email him. I said, Leonard, I'm just wondering if you would ever be interested to be a voice character in Transformers. And I've got this great role. It's a pivotal role in this movie. Would you be interested? And he's like, I'd love to. I'm glad to be back. I was on the very first movie. And it was great. With the voice sessions, what we do is we kind of get a bunch of it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And then we put it in, and then we'll come back and we'll touch up certain lines.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So it kind of works pretty.
Well, let's just attack some stuff and see what it sounds like.
Okay. He sort of, gave us this great old man performance with a really gravelly voice, and he really talked. Yeah, it was great.
We couldn't have been happier when we started hearing some of the voiceovers coming in for us to be able to animate to.
Always the bravest of us, Optimus. But you could never make the hard decisions. Our planet will survive.
It was really a lot of fun to animate to. Our animators had a great time.
We watched the ADR session of Leonard Nimoy to see how he uses his mouth when he speaks. So we have those up on our monitor while we're animating Sentinel Prime character.
I am no longer your teacher, Optimus. You are mine.
Did they tell you how they broke the Pro Tools? Apparently, it only goes to 32,000 fades, and we had one reel with 32,000 fades, and it locked up.
The software that we work in is called Pro Tools, and for the first time ever, I found that we couldn't create any more fade files.
They had to call the engineers that invented it, and they realized they broke it. It never went to 32,000 fades.
Never imagined.
Never imagined.
Never imagined.
Why would you ever need to go beyond 32,000
fades in one reel?
On reel 7 of this movie, which happens to be the reel with the tilted building, the skyscraper coming down, all of that action, we maxed out the technology on that reel.
We couldn't add one more track. I mean, and this is a system that is so powerful, yet we maxed it out.
It took Transformers 3 to tell us that there was a maximum limit.
That's an absolute first.
We've all done big movies and never heard of that before.
The most important thing for us to do is, with our sounds, tell the story. We wanted to elevate the picture and create this alchemy between what you see and what you hear that brings the experience to another level.
That's a great sound.
One of the beautiful things about sound work is that it really helps to ground the pictures, especially in a big visual effects film.
Michael gave us a ton of creative freedom. He wanted us to keep things very specific, not have a lot of flab on the track, but that said, he let us go. As long as it was cool and worthy of the picture, it could go in.
Now, the enchilada.
So that mothership coming down is an elephant vocal as he's diving down. If anybody out there wants to make a mothership crashing sound.
Can't find a better sound team. What I love about them is they create so many sounds. They try to do things so different.
In the very beginning of the process, we started recording sounds, collecting sounds. A lot of sounds we didn't even know what they would be used for, but they were just good sounds.
If you're just keep an open mind to sort of what's out there in the world, you can make some happy sort of discoveries.
For all of these movies, I've had a lot of fun recording sounds in my kitchen. For the first movie, the sound of frenzy was the sound of my kitchen cabinet squeaking and chopped up, to sound like a little vocal. In the second movie, some of the sounds of jet fire were my broiler door on my stove creaking for his old rusty joints and parts. And on the third movie, I got to use my fridge. My fridge has a great, when you kind of let it just go, it's got a great groaning sound. And mic'd really closely and then slowed down a little bit and enhanced a little bit. That became the big sound for the building leaning down as it's crashing.
Yeah.
And that's a baboon. When we recorded this baboon, the baboon trainer told us, well, when you're recording, take your keys out of your pocket and just put it on the ground and pretend like you don't see what I'm about to do. And so I'm there under my headphones with my microphone, I've put my keys on the ground, and the trainer sneaks up behind me and steals the keys and runs off. So now the baboon is looking at me and looking at the trainer who's run off with my keys, and he starts flipping out. He's upset by the injustice of my keys getting stolen. So that's when he starts vocalizing and really emotional kind of, he's trying to let me know that my keys had just gotten stolen. So that sound of him trying to warn me, that emotional vocal, became the sound for the driller as he's tearing through Chicago and destroying the city.
The driller is really one of my favorites in all the series. There was a big party here, and the caterers dumped this block of ice on the ground outside of our cutting rooms. And we went outside, saw it, it was kind of melting, and we started sliding it around on the pavement.
And it was making this guttural kind of sound that almost sounded animalistic. And something we totally weren't planning, but it just happened to be an awesome sound that became the main element for the driller's body sliding.
I like the thing that's on 9 and 10 is a good sound.
Every scene is an opportunity to experiment and learn and try out something new.
So that's cool. That's good shit.
By the third movie now, we don't want to just go literal with it. And it's a lot more fun, and I think the product is a lot better to just try to take things that you'd never expect and plug it into something. Like for a lot of the alien guns, we used sounds that have nothing to do with guns. Like a water drop, boom, and then you take the boom and just repeat it, boom, 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 boom.
We always say, and we've been told that this is his happy place. Been in this room for 3 months, and it's been a bit crazy.
This is our first fight?
About 80.
Yeah, crunchy.
Bubbly. Do you know what I'm saying?
Certainly the most ambitious sound job we've ever done. I hope people get out there and just dig it, because we have.
We're in Russia. This is the biggest premiere in the history of the world.
Well, we have the green carpet, not the red carpet, which is fun.
This has been a whirlwind, it's been a roller coaster. I'm so thrilled to be here with everybody after all our hard work.
Fans are definitely going to see stuff they have not seen before.
I thought the premieres we did for the last two were pretty spectacular. I kind of want to do a fourth one just to see what the premiere is going to be like. Where do we go, to the moon?
I can't wait for the Linkin Park concert tonight in Red Square.
You couldn't imagine building a better backdrop for a live performance.
Red Square, Russia, Linkin Park, crazy.
I am very proud of Transformers, including all the things that I've ever said bad about Transformers, because I think that those things needed to be said so that we could be the Transformers 3 that we became, honestly. And it is the best movie we've made.
I had a blast working on this movie, and I feel very grateful to Mike and to everybody that believed in me and took a chance on me. You know, and Michael, I've never been around anyone that works as hard as him. He's totally dedicated to these movies. He spent 6 years of his life working on them every single day. You know, he works really hard, and the only way I felt like I could thank him for giving me this opportunity was by working really hard for him, which I hope I did.
This crew and this cast, we've become pretty tight. I mean, this is now the third movie that I've worked with Tyrese and Shia, but you know, I think especially you see it in Shia. You know, when we shot the first one, he was just a kid, and he's grown up.
Watching Shia kind of grow up on these movies, you know, I've had to be kind of a father and a big brother to him.
You know, you watch him become a man. You know, I know that sounds kind of trite, but that's the truth. He was a teenager, and now he's a man.
He's a great actor, and, you know, I think the world of the kid.
I've worked with a great crew. We were really a well-oiled machine. It was kind of like a big, gigantic Transformer family, and they've worked their hearts out on this one, and it really shows.
One of the great and lucky things about working on films like this is that you get to travel and you get to see things that most folks don't get to see.
With Michael, doors open. Pyramids and space shuttles and Lincoln memorials.
There's so many things that we get access to as a film crew that are really, really special.
For instance, I'd never been to Chicago. I think Chicago is one of my favorite cities in the world now. And you know, you get a chance to see places and live in places that you haven't been. I don't know if I ever would have got those opportunities had I not been in this movie. I think at the end of the day, I'm just very grateful for Michael giving me the opportunity early on and for letting me continue my character in these movies. And I've had a blast. I really have.
It's hard to soundbite my 6 years with Michael, and it's very difficult, man. It's hard to encapsulate all these memories. I have 6 years of memories. It's hard to pick one.
Yeah, that's good. You know, this has been 6.5 or 7 years. It feels like we never stopped. It's like we've all been this crazy family for 7 years.
It's kind of been a magical kind of ride working with 4,000 artists, and remembering the very first day when I had the very first test screening in Arizona with 400 people, I'm like saying to myself, this is a dumb robot movie.
I'm sure Paramount and Hasbro and all of us involved will want to do another one. My guess is we're going to do a lot of reimagining when we get there.
You know there are going to have to be more of these movies. It's one of those just uber successful franchises, and it's grown in its potential instead of gotten weaker. That's a sign that people want to see more of it, and I think there can be more of them. It's very tempting to go back, you know, when I see Bumblebee's face, and it's just to think I'm handing it off to somebody else, you know. But I'm really in need of doing another movie right now. I'm just, I need something creatively to do something different. So maybe I just need to recharge my batteries. You asked me the question again. Space is about wonderment. First time the shuttle went off, America was watching it.
I remember watching the very first space shuttle flight on a very small TV set in a dorm room in college and thinking, gosh, that would be so neat.
When I was a kid, you know, nobody would ever thought that I'd be sending people into space.
Out here, people are dealing with a vehicle that's the size of a 737 and sending it 17,500 miles an hour in 8.5 minutes. I mean, it's really serious stuff.
The shuttle goes up and comes back. And it's done 133 times, so the public's attitude about it is entirely different than the people involved in the program and what it actually has achieved.
Going to the moon was a huge accomplishment for humanity. And we've done so many missions on the shuttle, people don't realize that we've made this other huge accomplishment and building the International Space Station.
The most dramatic thing, of course, was the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia, because that really focused attention on what the agency's mission should be.
We have had 2 tragic accidents out of 133 launches. So you have to look at the space business as that kind of business.
In 2004, it came out with the decision to retire the shuttle fleet and retire a program that has been in existence now for almost 30 years and move in a new direction.
Holy cow, I'd love to see us go back to the moon and Mars. I'd like to see that in my lifetime anyway.
I'm very concerned about the future. We've wasted an awful lot of time over the last 30 years.
We've sent a lot of astronauts around the Earth for 30 years, and we haven't sent astronauts anywhere else. And I think that we realize that it's time to take those next steps beyond Earth orbit and see what else is out there.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
We had the spirit back in those days, you know, during particularly Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, when we were just starting out. It was a time where you really were excited about the future. This Saturn V, which was a majestic rocket. It really was a beautiful thing. This is a gigantic 365-foot rocket. 7.5 million pounds of thrust, 5 engines in the first stage. Worked every time. We launched that 13 times, 12 times in Apollo and 1 time in Skylab. And it just performed beautifully. And the same way with the Apollo spacecraft. Same dedication I saw in Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo, I've seen over the last 14 years working with these people, but I don't see enough to keep that spirit going, regretfully. Because the amount of money that's going to be given to the space program is going to be limited just like everything else. There's no question about it. I wish I could be more excited about it at this particular time. We'll see what happens.
A lot of people will talk about how can the agency get more involved in American culture or somehow get it into their mind. And my response is, I don't think the issue is as much getting NASA into people's minds. I think it's more about getting them more specific information about what we do. I think the knowledge is a mile wide, but it only goes about an inch deep. They like NASA, they think NASA's cool, but they don't really know specifically what we're doing these days.
I started working at NASA as a student in the early days of the shuttle program in the 80s. I've been here 25 years, and the changes that I've seen, I think, have to do with the evolution of the space shuttle program, because that's really been the only program I've worked with here at NASA. We're coming up on the 30-year anniversary of the space shuttle program in April of this year. The shuttle configuration hasn't really changed that much. I mean, we've made a lot of improvements technically inside the various systems on board the space shuttle. The way we conduct the launch countdown and the facilities are all the same here at Kennedy.
I grew up and was raised right here in Brevard County, Cocoa, Florida, and best job in town. I mean, it was the best job in town to get. God, who doesn't want to build a rocket? I mean, really. My process is the VAB, anything that goes on in there, but as we go to stacking the boosters, as the boosters come over from the RPSF, or even from Utah, that's my building out back too, is the RPSF, which is a rotation processing facility. We process the boosters over there, stain them up straight, ship them over to the VAB, get them ready to stack on the MLP. And after we stack the boosters, both left and right, then we bring the external tank in. It comes down from MSU and it comes in right here at the turn basin. Take that off the barge, bring it inside, prep it, stick it up in the prep cell, get it ready to go over for mate. And we do all the closeouts on that. So, and then I turn it over to the orbiter guys. From start to finish, it's 45 days on a good flow.
In the early days of the shuttle program, we were launching a lot of satellites. We had some scientific laboratories that actually stayed inside the payload bay of the space shuttle.
One of the greatest inventions we've had is the Hubble telescope, to actually go out there and show, planets so far away.
We then started with the shuttle Mir program, where we had a partnership with Russia, and we were able to learn about how you live and work in space for long duration periods of time on board a space station. And then we launched the International Space Station with 16 nations, and so that's been a huge success. All these components are built all over the world for the space station, and they end up in our space station processing facility. We check them out, test them, connect them together, make sure they're all working correctly, and then launch them. And the astronauts, they're flying at 17,000 miles per hour around the Earth in these huge spacesuits and actually assemble the space station elements together. And today it's the size of a football field, and we've got space station crews living on board 24/7.
People don't really know much about it, but they do a lot of very important experiments up there in terms of inventing new drugs and possible cures for diseases, stuff like that.
Hey! The awesome smell of space.
It's an amazing turn of events, and I think it's really a wonderful symbol of humans working together from different countries. Because up in space, at least for now, you don't really worry so much about war, I think, when you have astronauts working together internationally.
We have 3 missions left, STS-133, STS-134, and then STS-135. It is taking a number of supplies up to the International Space Station, and there is no other vehicle at the moment that can do what the space shuttle does. So in these last 3 missions, we have to load up the station with supplies, spares, and of course delivering things like Robonaut. It was developed in a really innovative partnership between NASA and GM, General Motors. It just represents a new way of working in space. He can do very intricate tasks. And so I think it's to get him up there and to see what he's capable of and what the astronauts are capable of doing with Robonaut, and then looking for opportunities to get out there and do some tests. What can he do outside the vehicle? What kind of equipment can he work with? What kind of tools can he work with? What can he do that the astronauts can't? And that's why they call it exploration. We're going to take him up there and find out.
We're going to be operating the space station. It's on orbit now till 2020. We will continue to have access to the space station through our international launch partners, which would be Russia, Japan, and in French Guiana with the European Space Agency.
This past year, we saw a private company do something that only nations have done over the past 5 decades, and that was to launch a spacecraft into orbit and safely return it into a splashdown in the Pacific. That is unique. So I think the biggest thing is kind of a shift from this monolithic government type program to doing things that excite industry and get people excited about investing in space and seeing that there's a future in space exploration.
Because of budgetary things, we're going to have to rely on the Russians for a while to carry our astronauts up, which certainly goes against my grain, going back to the history of the program and everything else. Even though we are friends now and colleagues and working hard together on the space program along with 15 other nations. But still, we've been the leader in space, and I'm very concerned about the future.
From the processing team of Discovery to the crew of Discovery, enjoy the ride. Thank you very much.
Go for main engine start. We have main engine start. 2, 1. Booster ignition and the final liftoff of Discovery. A tribute to the dedication, hard work, and pride of America's space shuttle team. The shuttle has cleared the tower.
Discovery now making one last reach for the stars.
A lot of people are sad about the retirement of the space shuttle, and I understand that. It has been an incredible workhorse over the past 3 decades. But, you know, that decision was made in 2004 in the wake of the Columbia accident. And what the agency is doing now is focusing on how to extend humanity's reach beyond Earth orbit. And to do that, you have to retire the shuttle fleet. I don't look at it as much as an ending as I do the next step in our exploration of space.
When the Apollo program was shut down, and we actually had 3 more missions for Apollo. We were going to go 18, 19, and 20. As you recall, the last Apollo mission was Apollo 17. And that was cut off by the economic situation back at the time. The day we sent off Armstrong, Collins, and Aldrin was real ironic to me. Just as Neil Armstrong put his foot on the moon, we laid off 1,800 people down here, which is lost in the situation now, but that's what happened to the program. So NASA turned around, the administration turned around and said, okay, where can we go from here? You can't continue Apollo, we're not going to give you the money for it. So it settled on the shuttle program. As much credit as I can give to the space shuttle and the things that have transpired over the last 30 years, I can say at the same time that we really sentenced ourselves to 30 years of hard labor in LEO. LEO is low Earth orbit. And that's where we've been for the last 30 years. Ironically now, I look at 1970, what did we have? We had an economic crisis, we had a major energy crisis, and we had problems with employment and everything else. Does that sound familiar? Because that's what we have right now. And that's the way it has evolved and how the space program has been affected.
Our first goal is to complete the International Space Station by 2010. We will finish what we have started. In 2010, the Space Shuttle, after nearly 30 years of duty, will be retired from service.
NASA is a very small investment of our taxpayer dollars. When you look at the grand scheme of the federal budget, it's less than 1% of the entire federal budget. I think we're respected around the world in the technical communities for what NASA has achieved and going into space these last 50 years since the first flight of Alan Shepard back in 1961.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The nation needs a challenge. We had the challenge back in 1958 through 1969. It was a race. The Soviets were rattling their rockets against us, and then, of course, they shocked the world when they put the Sputnik up in October of 1957, and just shocked the world and sort of woke us up to a degree, and we started to come back. In those days, when we established the Mercury program and the follow-on programs that led us to the landing on the moon, the nation was behind us 100%. That was the big difference in those days.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
After we landed the astronauts on the moon, we had beaten the Russians. Now, the vagaries of the American public and the Congress are such that once you've done it, a little bit of interest is lost.
It's very pretty out here.
The entire world was watching when Apollo 11 landed on the moon in 1969. How many people were watching when Apollo 12 landed? And you can remember the coverage of Apollo 13. By that time, they'd considered moon landings routine, and it wasn't until you had the explosion of the service module that people paid attention to that mission. In Apollo 14, if you ask people what they remember about that, it was Alan Shepard's golf shot. You know, not the area of the moon that they were exploring in the rocks and what they learned from that. So we're a nation that likes firsts, and I think part of that is going to be that next first thing.
Touchdown.
For me, it would be that next human step on another celestial body. Now, a lot of people say it's Mars, but for me, I don't care.
You know, a lot of the questions that we look at NASA are some simple questions is, why are we here and how did we get here? Are we alone? These are very simple questions, but they're very hard to try to find answers to.
I think the exploration of Mars helps lend answers to those questions. It is the next planet that is closest to us. It does have a bit of an atmosphere. You know, could life in some other form exist on Mars?
The first time I worked at NASA, working with some of the greatest physicists, and you know, in private time you ask them, it's like, so do you believe in life on other planets? And they go, absolutely. They go, it's arrogant for us to think there's no one else out there. There's so many planets, it's so big.
If you talk to some of the former Apollo astronauts, they'll say it's about the survival of the species, that at some point we're going to have to leave this planet and go out and colonize something else, just as in the 1700s and 1800s people were colonizing North America.
Mars is very important because it is, in a lot of ways, the future. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but we're working towards that. It will be an exciting time to see if this happens in our lifetimes or not. I mean, it takes 6 months to get there and 6 months to come back, and I guess they say sometimes that's a 2-year mission. So there's a lot that's involved in getting people to Mars.
Taking 6 months to go one way to Mars is ridiculous. Hey, you know, maybe they'll do it sometime, but you need much more powerful upper stages, which we don't have. The rockets such as SpaceX, the Falcon 9 rocket, and that type of thing will service the space station. That's all. So let's say we get that super rocket. What are we going to be able to do? Because we are limited by the upper stages. We're going to land astronauts on an asteroid 15 years from now. Wow! We've been relying on the same fuel that we used back on Apollo, and that's liquid hydrogen. And liquid hydrogen has done a great job. But the rocket scientists would tell you that the specific impulse of liquid hydrogen is limited. You need something much more powerful than that to get out.
To be able to create a habitat for humans to live and survive that 6-month trip there and to stay there on the planet and be able to survive that and then come back, you've got to have enough supplies and water and food, and your launch vehicle and your space vehicle has got to be able to get back and forth safely. The terrain of Mars, there's a lot to be understood there. How our equipment would work, how people would survive there, what kinds of habitats we would have once you get to Mars. All that still has to be decided and engineered, designed.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition and liftoff of Ares 1X. Testing concepts for the future of new rocket design.
I think we have the technology to do it now. I really do. It's just, of course, it always boils down to funding. So.
And SEP. We show a SEP and a tumble motor ignition.
I understand that some believe that we should attempt a return to the surface of the moon first, as previously planned. But I just have to say, pretty bluntly here, We've been there before. Buzz has been there. There's a lot more of space to explore and a lot more to learn when we do. After decades of neglect, we will increase investment right away. We will invest more than $3 billion to conduct research on an advanced heavy lift rocket, a vehicle to efficiently send into orbit the crew capsules, propulsion systems, and large quantities of supplies needed to reach deep space. And we will finalize a rocket design no later than 2015 and then begin to build it.
To my mind, since I devoted most of my life to it and very, very proud of being a part of it, it sort of breaks my heart. What if 30 years ago we were able to develop a more powerful upper stage for the rockets we have today? There are things like a photon rocket, there are variations of different ionized rockets, nuclear rockets, and that type of thing. It would have been nice if 30 years ago we started working on that. Where I'd like to see us in the position right now where we could say, all right, we're really ready to go out. Mars, to me, is just the first step. That's a baby step. The moon was a baby step. If you want to be a space cadet, you go out. What would probably challenge us is when we really, in the eyes of the world, are now a second-class space nation. Maybe that would do it.
I think largely people are driven by events and publicity only lasts so long, but there are certain things that are indelible in people's minds. And I think the space shuttle in particular, when people look back at it, it will remain indelible, as the Apollo era did. I mean, it's an era of history we're going through. We don't often see that it's exciting people as much as it is, but in the end, when people look back and they see what has been accomplished, you realize what a great stride we've made as humans.
And to the ship that has led the way time and time again, we say farewell, Discovery.
Space shuttle. It should be commemorated, it should be marked, but at the same time, you know, we should be looking ahead at what we're doing.
122 million miles flown during 25 challenging space flights. Your landing ends a vibrant legacy for this amazing vehicle that will long be remembered. Welcome home, Endeavour.
It's getting harder right now. We're losing a lot of good talented people around here, a lot of good friends.
Having fired the imagination of a generation, a ship like no other, its place in history secured, the space shuttle pulls into port for the last time, its voyage at an end.
A little more than 40 years ago, astronauts descended the 9-rung ladder of the lunar module called Eagle. It wasn't just the greatest achievement in NASA's history, it was one of the greatest achievements in human history.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Boy. And the question for us now is whether that was the beginning of something or the end of something. I choose to believe it was only the beginning.
I think science fiction is very entertaining for people because it can make you think about things in a way you haven't thought about them. It sort of stretches your imagination about the impossible.
But if you talk to the people who were involved in NASA, chances are they were inspired by something as a child. You know, for me, it would have been television shows like Lost in Space and Star Trek. For other people, you know, younger people, it might be something like the Transformers. So we have to remember that this is fun stuff. We have to get people excited about it, and that's what movies like that do. It kind of touches that inner child in us that gets us excited and reminds us of why we were interested in space exploration to begin with.
so many people believe that there's got to be something else out there. And that's why alien movies are so popular. In my lifetime, I would love to have contact with an alien race. I'm sure a lot of people would.